Welcome to Blackman Folk Tales. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also like and share. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell, as this means the whole world to us. The sky was still heavy with mist when Ethan stirred awake, the sound of rustling leaves outside his small wooden shack reminding him that morning had come too soon. His bed was nothing more than a thin mat woven from palm fibers, frayed at the edges, and his blanket was an old sackcloth he had found discarded behind the village market. Hunger gnawed at him like a cruel reminder, a constant companion that never let him forget how empty his life felt without parents to provide for him. At just 8 years old, he had already learned how to fight battles most children never faced: loneliness, hunger, and the cruel stares of people who whispered behind his back that he was cursed to walk this earth alone. But Ethan had something they did not expect: an unrelenting spark that refused to die out. Every morning, he tied the torn straps of his sandals, each step feeling like the world dared him to keep moving, and he walked miles of dusty roads, barefoot when the straps gave way, determined to reach the small, weather-beaten schoolhouse that stood at the far end of the village. He would walk past fields where other children played or helped their parents with farming, past streams where women fetched water, and down paths so lonely that even the birds seemed afraid to sing. His journey was long, sometimes 3 hours each way, but it was more than a walk. It was a declaration to himself that no matter how much the world tried to crush him, he would not let it succeed. He whispered to himself as he walked, "This road is not the end of me, this road is leading me somewhere." At school, Ethan was not like the others. Most children were restless, waiting for the final bell so they could run home and play, but Ethan clung to every second in the classroom as if it were his only lifeline. His clothes were often patched with clumsy stitches, his belly sometimes empty, but his eyes burned with a hunger that food could not satisfy, the hunger to know more. He was the boy who stayed behind after class, offering to sweep the dusty floors or carry books for the teacher, just so he could buy himself another half hour with the blackboard or another glimpse at a borrowed book. While other students groaned when the teacher gave assignments, Ethan lit up, scribbling answers on the margins of torn scraps of paper, making do with the few pencils he found discarded and sharpened down to stubs. There were times he fainted in class from hunger and children laughed, but he stood back up, dusted himself off and kept reading as though nothing had happened. His teachers could not ignore him. There was something magnetic about the way he absorbed knowledge, the way he asked questions far beyond his age, the way he dreamed aloud about building things no one in the village could imagine. Yet, despite his brilliance, Ethan often felt the sting of being different. During lunch breaks, when the others shared their food, he would sit quietly, pretending to be busy with his notes, pretending he was not starving. But deep down, he knew. His struggle was shaping him into something stronger than even he could understand. The road to school was breaking his body, but it was molding his spirit into steel. The nights were the hardest, and it was in the silence of those nights that Ethan's true war began. After his long trek back home, he would sit under the flickering glow of a kerosene lamp, sometimes with nothing to eat, and pore over the few schoolbooks he had managed to borrow. The shack he lived in often leaked when it rained, and the wind howled through the broken wooden panels, but he didn't care. He would place stones on the corners of his papers so they wouldn't fly away, and he would read until his eyes burned with sleep. Neighbors would sometimes pass by and shake their heads, saying, "Why does he bother? He has no family, no future." But Ethan refused to believe those words. He would look at the night sky, his heart pounding with a quiet kind of faith, and whisper, "My parents may be gone, but their blood gave me this chance. I will not waste it." There were nights when his stomach churned with hunger so fiercely that he thought he might collapse, yet he forced himself to imagine the classrooms he wanted to build someday, the lives he wanted to change, and the roads he wanted to pave for children like him. He did not have shoes, he did not have parents, he did not have wealth, but he had something greater, a dream that he held on to with every fiber of his being. In those moments, Ethan realized something powerful. The miles he walked each day were not just carrying his body to a schoolhouse, they were carrying his soul toward a destiny no one else could see. And though no one clapped for him, no one cheered for his effort, and no one promised him that his dream would come true, he kept walking, kept learning, and kept believing. For in his heart, he knew that struggle was not his prison, it was his preparation. The turning point of Ethan's life arrived on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day that seemed destined to fade into memory, until it didn't. He was 14, sitting in the back of the classroom with his head bent low over a borrowed book, when a woman walked into the schoolhouse. Her name was Claire, a volunteer who traveled from city to city, helping rural schools with supplies and guidance. At first, Ethan barely noticed her. He was too lost in his world of words. But when Claire saw him, his thin frame hunched over, his clothes patched and faded, his pencil sharpened to a stub that looked like it might break with the next word, something about the boy struck her deeply. She asked the teacher about him, and the teacher, with both pride and sorrow, explained Ethan's story, how he was an orphan, how he walked miles every day, how he stayed late just to study. Claire couldn't shake the image. Later, she approached Ethan, crouching down to meet his eyes, and asked softly, "Why do you try so hard?" His answer was simple but unforgettable, Because if I stop, I lose everything. That single sentence pierced her heart, and from that moment on, Claire knew she couldn't let his fire go to waste. She began mentoring him, sending him books, and eventually, with her connections, she secured him a scholarship abroad. For Ethan, stepping onto an airplane for the first time was both terrifying and exhilarating. The boy who once walked miles barefoot was now flying across oceans, carrying nothing but faith, determination, and a few second-hand clothes folded neatly in a borrowed bag. He was leaving behind the dirt roads of his childhood for a world he had only seen in dreams. But the new world was not the paradise he had imagined. The city was dazzling, its tall glass towers reaching toward the sky, its streets alive with lights that never seemed to fade, but for Ethan, it was overwhelming. He was a stranger, a poor orphan in a place where wealth and opportunity seemed to flow freely for others but not for him. His scholarship covered tuition, but not the 1,000 little expenses that came with living in a foreign land. He took up jobs no one else wanted, washing dishes in greasy kitchens, sweeping floors in late-night diners, delivering newspapers before dawn. Sometimes he worked until his fingers bled, then dragged himself to class half asleep but still determined to learn. There were nights when he had no food and days when his clothes embarrassed him, but he swallowed the shame and pushed forward. While others complained about long lectures, Ethan savored them, scribbling notes with the same passion he had carried from his village schoolhouse. But the challenges were not just physical. He battled self-doubt, the nagging voice that whispered he didn't belong here, that he would always be the orphan from a forgotten shack. And yet, every time those thoughts threatened to overwhelm him, he remembered the miles he had once walked, the nights under the kerosene lamp, the promise he had made to himself that he would never give up. Those memories became his anchor in the storm. It was during these years that Ethan discovered the world of technology. It started with a simple computer class, a subject he had barely heard of back in his village. The first time he touched a keyboard, something awakened in him. Here was a tool that could connect worlds, break down barriers, and change lives. He learned quickly, absorbing coding languages and digital design with the same hunger he once had for borrowed books. Soon he wasn't just studying, he was creating. His mind raced with ideas, and one vision kept haunting him. What if children in poor villages, children like himself, didn't have to walk miles to school? What if they could access education right from their homes through technology? He began sketching plans for a platform that could provide free lessons, resources, and opportunities for children who had nothing but dreams. But the road was brutal. Investors turned him down, professors told him it was too ambitious, and even friends urged him to abandon the idea. Still, Ethan's resolve never wavered. He told himself, "I've walked roads longer than this. If I could endure hunger, rejection cannot stop me." And so, in the quiet corners of libraries between shifts at work and late into the night, he coded, he planned, and he dreamed, planting the seeds of a vision that would one day transform the world. The day Ethan launched his platform was one of the most terrifying and exhilarating of his life. Years of sleepless nights, countless sacrifices, and endless rejections had led to this single moment. At first, nothing happened. His website went live, but the world barely noticed. A few children logged in, then a few more, but growth was painfully slow. Doubts crept in, and for a moment he wondered if everyone had been right, if his dream really was too big. But Ethan refused to give in. He reached out to schools in rural areas, pitched his platform tirelessly, begged organizations to try it, and slowly word began to spread. What started as a trickle of users soon grew into a stream, then into a flood. Villages where children once walked hours to school now had access to lessons on small, donated devices. Teachers began praising the platform, and governments started to take notice. Investors who had once laughed at him now begged to be part of his vision. Ethan's creation became more than just a website, it became a movement. And with its success came wealth, more money than he had ever imagined possible. Overnight, the orphan who once walked barefoot became known as a billionaire. Yet, for Ethan, the money was never the prize. It was the tool. He built schools in villages like the one he grew up in, funded scholarships for orphans, and ensured that no child ever had to choose between hunger and education. The miles he once walked had now shortened for millions of children worldwide. But success did not erase the scars of his journey, it magnified them. For every achievement, Ethan remembered the struggles, the hunger, the loneliness, the rejections. Instead of burying those memories, he wore them like armor, a reminder of where he came from and why he had started. Reporters clamored to interview him, to know the secret behind his rise. Some expected him to speak of brilliant strategies, of clever business deals, of hidden luck. But when asked, Ethan always said the same thing: "The secret is the miles I walked. Every step I took, every struggle I endured taught me not to give up. If I could survive that road, I could survive anything." His words inspired millions not just because of the wealth he had gained, but because of the life he had built from nothing. He became more than a billionaire. He became a symbol of hope, proof that poverty was not destiny, that orphans could rise, and that dreams born in hardship could reshape the world. His story spread like wildfire, motivating countless children who once thought their circumstances defined them. In the quiet of his success, Ethan often returned to the village where his journey began. He would walk the same dirt road he once traveled as a child, feeling the earth beneath his feet, remembering the boy with torn sandals who whispered to himself, "This road is not the end of me." Now, when he walked that path, children ran to greet him, their eyes wide with admiration, their hands clutching schoolbooks he had donated. The schoolhouse, once broken and fading, now stood tall, rebuilt with modern classrooms, computers and resources beyond what he could have dreamed as a child. And when the children asked him how he had done it, how he had gone from walking miles to becoming a billionaire, he knelt down, looked them in the eyes and told them, "It wasn't money that changed my life. It was belief and it was perseverance. The miles I walked taught me to keep moving even when everything told me to stop. If you keep walking your road, one step at a time, you'll reach a place no one else can see but you." In that moment, Ethan's story came full circle. He was no longer just the orphan who walked miles to school. He was the man who had turned those miles into a legacy, a road that countless others would now walk behind him, not in struggle but in hope. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as this means a lot to us.